Member for Kennedy.
Speaker, I'm glad I made a mistake and had to come down early so I could hear speeches. So I know now why I do not sit here and listen to speeches or questions. I have heard a conglomeration of snivelling drivel in my life, but tonight's speeches, there is not the slightest scintilla of intellectual content in one of the speeches. Mr. Acting Speaker, I was rung up about this by the media, and I had no idea what's going on as usual. I'm out there in the burn docks working away for what I've got to work on. And he said, how are you going to vote on this, quality of marriage, gay marriage bill? And we had a little bit of an argument about the word gay, which we compromised and said same-sex marriage. And I said, what are you ringing me up about? Well, we're going to vote on it. But I said, you can't be serious. I mean, I've never been angry throughout this debate. I really found it extremely humorous, I've got to say. And I said, listen, mate, I don't know what it's like down south, but over here in North Queensland, there's 5% of the population of Australia, 5% of the population of Australia lives up here, and I don't think it's a great deal different from the rest of Australia, and no one seems to get married up here. I mean, I can't remember the last time I found a couple getting married. So, mate, we can't get the heteros to marry. You've got absolutely no hope of getting that other mob to marry, but thanks for your call. I thought it was funny. Now, whilst you people are all piously holding a hand over you and saying this is the greatest thing since Burke invented freedom and democracy, down in the pub, in the real world, where I live and other people live, in the real world, I walked in the pub and said, Bobby, I'm going bush, mate, before they make it compulsory. And everyone roared laughing. But you don't live in that world. You don't live in that world where real people live. You live down here where you listen to this incredible concoction of drivel. Well, you must have forgotten where you come from, mate. Now, let me continue.
Member for Wakefield.
People accuse me of being anti-homosexual. Well, if you read my book, which I might add, it's only $29 at all best-selling bookshops, History of Australia, which was the best-selling non-fiction work, and the year it came out, we thank the Murdoch Press, the only time in my life I've ever thanked the Murdoch Press for publishing it. But if you read that, and the head of COSBOA for Australia, he said, I always said you tagged as a redneck. He said, the part of your book I loved most was that homosexual friend of yours. And it was very humorous. And I couldn't leave it out of History of Australia because we are a fun people. But we lost our sense of humour completely in this country. And I just thought his humour deserved to be put in a History of Australia. While you're down here congratulating yourself on your popularity and winning the vote, I was up there at the coalface working to try and get some votes up in the state election campaign. When the first result came in on a booth, now this is a party that, and I'm not particularly proud about this, but we started our life with an advertisement, which was the most unpleasant advertisement. I agreed to it, so I will take the blame, along with everybody else. But it established us as a very anti-homosexual party. There was no doubt about that. And we subsequently got, as a first-time-out party, they took our name off us, but exit polling indicated that our vote was effectively 20.5% of the population of Queensland. Coming back to this election, whilst you people were all running around advocating a yes vote, the first polling booth came in, the biggest polling booth in the state electorate. I was handing out how to vote cards. And whilst I'd like to attribute it to myself, I really don't think I had a great deal. And the vote came in. This is a booth which is normally almost always won by the ALP. We got 720 votes. The ALP got 320. And the Liberals got 120. Now, I mean, I said, would you please go back and get the correct figures? Because they were staggering. But when I looked at the figures in all the electorates we ran in, I mean, it was like between 19 and 25% bracketed the four parties. Now, One Nation and KP were continuously, where KP was running, were achieving much more votes than the majors. Much more votes. But the way the preferences fall, isn't always the way we want them to fall. The Labor Party in Queensland got one of the lowest votes ever achieved by the Labor Party since 1915. Oh, that's something to be proud of, isn't it? Now, if you say, well, the majority rules and the majority has it right because this is a democracy. Well, I think it was back in the year 7 or the year 11, I can't remember. There's a bloke called Barabbas ran, and geez, he got a good vote. Geez, he got a good vote. I can't help but point out the abolition of slavery. We won it on a trick. We Christians won it on a trick. It was the only way we could get the abolition of slavery through the Parliament, Mr. Speaker. So I don't think, as the writer of the book on liberty, he said, the tyranny of the majority in a democracy doesn't deliver justice or truth or rightness. It delivers the will of the majority, which may not necessarily be very just. Mr. Speaker, the people advocating this proposition tonight, who speak out for the LGBTs, they have, maybe 60 years on their side. I have 3.5 billion years of genetic programming on my side because we human beings, they tell us, have been around for 3.5 billion years. And one thing for absolute certain, Mr. Speaker, we're all developed from heterosexual couples. That is one thing we know absolutely, up until the last 40 years anyway, Mr. Speaker. So genetically, we're programmed. Now, if you want to throw a young lad between the ages of 9 or 10 and the ages of 15 and make him go to school wearing a dress, you seriously mess with his head. And if you're looking for reasons why there are distinguishing factors of the incredible race of people, as I call this in my book, and I think we are, and we always get there in the end, but geez, we run off the rails badly at times. But if you analyse why this country has the highest male juvenile suicide rates in the world continuously, why is that? Why is that? Is something going wrong here? Now, we have an extraordinary incidence, I think, of compared with other nations, of homosexual behaviour in Australia. And I think that, the people that have been speaking for this bill would agree with me on that. Mr. Speaker, the Speaker before last said, it won't be held against you. There'll be no discrimination against people exercising their rights to have a view on this conduct. That's what he said. Well, go and ask the doctors that don't want to do abortions in hospitals how well they're travelling. Those that you can find that would speak up on this issue. The Bishop of Tasmania was criminally prosecuted, Mr. Speaker, for saying it's wrong to do that. Well, doesn't he have a right to a moral position? I'm not going around advocating that people that advocate homosexual behaviour should be put in jail, but the opposition is. The intolerance there is magnificent. I was in Sydney soon after my little party ran in that election, which, as I say, we had an advertisement which I'm not particularly proud of, and a bloke in a flash Mercedes-Benz, top of the range, he came up with such speed that I actually pushed my grandchild onto the pavement and jumped myself, and then screamed abuse. And, in another age and another time and another place, I'd have taken him out of the car and dealt with him as he should be dealt with, for screaming obscenities in front of little children. But that's the tolerance of the people that oppose us in this debate. They try and throw the Bishop of Tasmania in jail. They scream abuse at us. They campaign against us. That's all right. They can do that. I didn't know a lot about this, and I was asked to speak. We addressed a meeting of about 1,000 people in Brisbane, and not knowing a great deal about it, I spoke about Christianity. and the contribution that Christianity had made to the history of the world, from the abolition of communism, which killed more people than any other ism in human history, to the abolition of slavery, to the civilization of the Roman Empire, if you like. I spoke about all those things. But I listened in horror to the story of the two young mothers, and the first one started off by saying, my son told me that he had to go to school tomorrow in a dress. And I said, my boys will never, ever go in public in a dress. And I rang up the headmaster of the school, and he more or less told me that it's the orders of the education department and you'll send your kid to school in a dress. And then the second lady got up and she said that my son was told not only he had to go to school in a dress, and it's messing with young people's heads on a major scale here, but also he had to, in his head, become a woman for the day. Now, throughout history, the range of human history and the breadth of human history, there is no precedent for this sort of rubbish taking place. And do we have the rights over our children? Do you think seriously that the LGBT group are going to stop here? I mean, it may be funny to yell out in a pub, I'm going bush, before it becomes compulsory, but it's not quite so funny. Now you talk about equality. Well, they wanted equality in the giving of blood. They said, we have a right as homosexuals to give blood. So they did. And I think it was 72 children were injected with AIDS from the blood that was given. It was hushed up. I mean, it was amazing to me that it never got any publicity at all. And I actually had to ring up to verify whether the newspaper report I'd read was correct. There were 724 AIDS cases in this country. And no one ever brought up the fact that all of those AIDS cases were the poor little children that got it through blood transfusion, about whatever figure it was. But the rest of them were either intravenous drug users or men participating in homosexual behaviour. There were only 2 out of 724 cases that claimed they weren't, and the report noted that they were living with an at-risk person. In other words, homosexual person. So there's no such thing as AIDS in this country, except within that narrow group of intravenous drug users and people participating in that sort of behaviour. Mr. Speaker, I watched on television last night a murder case involving 2 people of that persuasion. And when I came to the office today, my Chief of Staff, who I might add voted yes, she said, oh, so-and-so, you better write them a letter, or write them a card or something. I said, what's that all about? Oh, the son got murdered, you know, it was an homosexual relationship. There was another case. And we all know about the Versace case. But, you know, there are some people that handle, there's no doubt there is a DNA thing there. And some people can handle it. But a lot of people don't. And there is a very, very ugly side to this, where the curtain comes down and we're not allowed to talk about it. Now, Mr. Speaker, there is an ultimate statement upon a race of people, and that is that they simply vanish from the gene pool. Now, if you take out my cousin brothers, the first Australians, and if you take out the migrant population in Australia, recent migrants, then we have the lowest birth rate on earth. We are a vanishing race. To quote the Burrell, the demographer from Melbourne, he wrote an article and he said current population of Australia is 22 million, and within 100 years the population of Australia will be 7,000. And I thought, this is ridiculous. I went down to the library and he said when 20 Australians die, they're only replaced by 17 people. So, I mean, if that happens 5 times over a century, then you will go from 21 million or 22 million people, whatever it was at the time, down to 7 million people. Well, I don't know, you might be a member of the vanishing race, but you better shut up, because you will be shortly if I lose my temper here. And I finally
Order. The member's time has expired. Pursuant to resolution, the Leader of the House, I'll just finish up here if that's okay. Pursuant to the resolution agreed to earlier today, the House stands adjourned until 9:30 a.m. tomorrow.
Everything else he said, I just think was too bad. When 20 people die, they're replaced by 17.